And this morning I want to call your attention to Jonah chapter 2. Jonah chapter 2 has about 10 verses. And it is almost entirely constituted by Jonah's prayer once he finds himself in the belly of a whale. Turn with me to Jonah chapter 2. If you don't mind, stand up. Even if you do mind, stand up. I'm going to read this morning from the New Living Translation. Please follow along with me with whatever translation you have. I guarantee you that you will be able to follow me, and the message, the spirit of the message will be identical. In fact, I want to double back to chapter 1, verse 17, and then read into chapter 2 for its entirety. Now the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Sound familiar? Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from inside the fish. He said, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me. You threw me into the ocean depths, and I sank down to the heart of the sea. The mighty waters engulfed me. I was buried beneath your wild and stormy waves. Then I said, O Lord, you have driven me from your presence. Oh Lord, it's a fire. Oh Lord, you have driven me from your presence, yet I will look once more toward your holy temple. I sank beneath the waves, and the waters closed over me. Seaweed wrapped itself around my head. I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates locked shut forever. But you, O Lord my God, snatched me from the jaws of death. Somebody say, snatched me. As my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord. And my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Those who worship false gods turn their backs on all God's mercies. But I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. Then the Lord ordered the fish to spit Jonah out onto the beach. Some translations say he caused the fish to vomit Jonah onto dry land. Have a seat. Now, you know the series is called the Jonah Chronicles, but I think I want to refer to this third installment as Center Me. Center Me. Put that aside, bracket it, don't try to figure it out yet. My father, it's Father's Day, my father is about 6'1", and has in his life weighed probably as much as 210, 220 pounds. He was and remains a lean brother. My father was in the Air Force, and when he was in the Air Force, Lonnie, he was a weightlifter and a boxer. And he was fairly accomplished in both. So much so that I grew up with a variety of trophies that decorated our den from my father's days as a boxer and a weightlifter. There were 24 or more trophies in the room that were tributes to his success as a boxer and a weightlifter. Don't get it twisted, he'll box you today. Knowing this, I still can't figure out why at about 13, 14, maybe 15 years old, as my military father was barking particular orders to me. I don't even know what he was saying. I can't figure out why today, knowing his background, I would or could imagine uttering with my own lips, man, be quiet. When I woke up, no. He did not knock me out, but I looked at him and could tell that he wanted to. And but for one thing, he would have. In fact, the one thing we shared in that moment was prayer. He was praying not to kill me, and I was praying he wouldn't. I do remember this. He snatched me up by the collar, looked me in my face with fire in his eyes, and the one thing I remember him saying is, have you lost your mind? And the truth is, y'all, for a split second, I did. I did. But by the time he said it, I'd recovered suddenly and had the presence of mind to start praying earnestly. Even while he had me by the collar, I'm saying, God, please don't let this man kill. Mama ain't even home. God, please don't let this man, and my only witness is my little sister, and if she sees this, she will automatically take his side. So God, please get me out of this trouble I'm in. Sound familiar? You didn't have the audacity to say what I said to a father who made every way for me, who provided everything I ever needed, who was always present. You didn't have the audacity to say that, but you have found yourself in trouble. Oh, yeah. Am I right? Yeah. You have been in a difficult situation, and the only thing you knew to do was pray. And let me remind you of what your prayer sounded like. God, if you will get me out of this, I promise you I will not touch that stuff again. You don't want to be honest. God, if you will rescue me from this, God, I'm so sorry. I have messed up. I promise you, I won't even go there anymore. Okay, maybe that wasn't you. Oh, this was your prayer. God, please, I promise you, if you will get me out of this fix, I will start coming to church every. There I go, there you go. I'm just reminding you of your prayer. We've all been inclined to pray in trouble. Nothing wrong with that. And we have all found ourselves praying in dire straits. It seems a universal reflex to call on God when we discover suddenly we've made a mess we cannot get ourselves out of. It is an old reflex, perhaps as old as time itself. We are all prone to pray earnestly. We'll even sweat praying earnestly to God when we find ourselves in the belly of the whale. And yet, it's interesting to note, y'all, that Jonah's prayer in chapter 2 isn't quite like the prayer we remember praying when we were in the middle or the belly of the whale. It's different. It's not even a prayer of petition. It is more like a prayer of praise. Jonah is in the belly of the whale. And he is praying a prayer of praise. And understand that chapter 2 is the center of the book of Jonah. And at the center of the book of Jonah is a prayer of praise, which makes me want to take a momentary detour to tell you that prayer ought to be the center of our lives of faith. Without the practice and the power of prayer, we are half or less of what we could be in God. Can I get an amen somewhere? Jonah prays this prayer. And I want to talk about this prayer. But before I talk at length about this prayer, I want to talk about the problem that the prayer answers. Jonah's problem is described in chapter 1. I started this series a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think. And when I started the series, I'd forgotten about a book in my library. It's a book by Eugene Peterson. Now, Eugene Peterson is the brother who's responsible for the Message Bible. But Mr. Peterson, Pastor Peterson, wrote a book called Under the Predictable Plant. And that title will make greater sense to you next week and the following week. But he wrote this book about ministry and Jonah. And when I remembered in my library, I went to it and I was looking through Mr. Peterson's book. And on the very first page, there was a sentence that Mr. Peterson wrote that arrested my attention. He was describing Jonah's trouble in chapter 1. He was describing how Jonah, of course, had run away from God, and his disobedience, his running away from God, caused such havoc on the ship that was traveling to Tarshish that the people there threw him overboard. And the sentence was, Jonah was thrown off. Simple sentence. Jonah was thrown off. But it arrested my attention, wouldn't let me keep reading. And I started to wonder to myself, Pam, why is this sentence so compelling to me? And initially I thought, maybe it's the word off. Because I know a lot of off people. There's a lot of people in here who are, thank you, baby, off. Chances are, if you're not off, you're sitting beside somebody who is, don't look at them though, don't look. Don't look straight at me, don't straight at me. The world is full of people who just strike you as kind of, I thought maybe that's it. Then I thought again, and I decided that what was compelling about this sentence, Jonah was thrown off, had perhaps something to do with what Jonah describes in chapter 2 as having been kicked to to the curb, rejected, thrown away, he says in one translation. He was thrown aside. Now, it strikes me that many people have this same experience of having been thrown away, thrown aside, kicked to the curb, rejected by other people, and that certainly does not feel good at all. The beauty of Jonah is that when he is kicked to the curb, God sends a fish to snatch him up before he drowns in his loneliness, before he drowns in by the heavy weight of having been rejected. So maybe, I thought, Jonah was thrown off grabs my attention because it is a sentiment, a sentence that is consistent with our experiences of rejection. Now, I'm looking around the room and you're looking at me as if you've never been rejected. That you're looking at me as if no one has ever sort of made you feel insignificant, made you feel less than what you have always been told you were. You've never had your heart broken? You've never had your ego insulted? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jonah was thrown off. Maybe that's what was so powerful about that sentence. But then I had the third and final thought, that being thrown off doesn't only mean that we got rejected. It means that we find ourselves and our lives somehow off kilter, off balanced. We got thrown off. We got distracted. Can you remember a time in your life where you thought you knew where you were going? You knew how to get there. You had every confidence that you would arrive, and then bam, life happens, and suddenly, abruptly, you get thrown off. Thrown off. Off is just kind of out of sync. You don't even have to have been devastated by something, but sometimes the experience of off is just an awkward one, and rather than run to the place you thought you were going, you start to limp to that place, and your limping is so off balance that even though you're trying to go straight, you keep moving to the left or you keep moving to the right because your balance is off. And you try very hard to overcompensate, and no matter how hard you overcompensate, you just can't get back to center again. Has anybody here ever felt like your life is not bad? It's not something you're going to cry about, but it's just off. How did I get here? Something is strange. This isn't what I expected. This isn't how I thought I would feel. Something is kind of off. I mean, I'm getting up, I'm going to work every day, I'm doing my best to be in worship on Sunday, I'm praying, but something is still off. Come on, is there anybody here who can relate to this experience that off? Something is just not right. Things are out of sync. Off. Have you ever had an off day? What about an off week? Have you ever had an off year? What about an off season? Off. I'm just off. It means you're just not on your game the way you thought you would. Miami's kind of, I'm just saying, I'm trying to have an analogy. I'm just, work with me.
We with you.
Oh, this is not what we expected. Our experience is off. And see, the worst part of off is that it usually does not reveal what the problem is that is keeping you off. If we knew what the problem was, we might be able to work on that. We might be able to address that. But off comes with questions. What's going on? I don't know why. I just know I'm off. I'm off. I'm off. My game is off. My plans are off. My vision is off. Family life is off. The job is, I thought I would love this job, but there's something off about it. I can't feel like I want to feel about this the way I expected to feel. Something is, my marriage is not bad, but it's just off. My family, my relationship with my brother, my relationship with my sister, it's not as bad as it could be, but somehow something's not right. And it feels off. Jonah is in the belly of the whale. And it is interesting to me that his response to finding himself in this dark place, alone. Ever been in a dark place? Alone? And people all around you, but yet still feeling alone in the belly of the whale. Here's the thing about Jonah chapter 2. God gives an order for a fish to swallow Jonah. And can I be honest, this scene kind of makes me laugh. I know you've never laughed at the Bible before. But it feels, I can't say it that way because you won't understand. But you ever heard the expression, man bites dog? So here, rather than fish, or rather than a man catching a fish catches a man. It's kind of like David or Scott taking off in the morning, and they're going fishing. And by the afternoon, April or Stacy hear the doorbell. She goes to the door, opens it, and instead of seeing David standing there with a big fish in his hand, or April standing there with Scott standing there with a big fish in his hand, there's the fish at the door. And Scott and David are on the hook. Crazy. Kind of off. It's this kind of strange picture that is written into Jonah. Jonah finds himself in the belly of the whale. His life is off. But it turns out that being off is an opportunity. That God has ordered Jonah's off day. That God has designed your off season. That he's behind it all. That God can, God will throw you off. But why? Follow me. Jonah's problem in chapter 1 is deeper than disobedience. Jonah's sin is the sin of self-centeredness. Listen, you don't have to be arrogant, pompous to be self-centered. All you really have to do to be self-centered is to be concerned about only yourself. And so he was disobedient to the call of God, but at the root of his disobedience was his self-centeredness. He put himself at the center of his universe. We talked about this a little bit Wednesday. At the end of the 16th century, there was a scientist by the name Copernicus. Copernicus is called the father, referred to as the father of the scientific revolution, because he proposed something that blew everybody's mind. He proposed he proposed the idea that instead of the sun revolving around the earth, that what was really happening to keep some parts of the world dark at the same time that other parts of the world was light, what was really happening was the earth was revolving around the sun. Now that seems like a very simple scientific fact. You were brought up hearing that. You were educated having learned that, at least in theory, at least conceptually, but in practice, we still behave as if the sun revolves around the earth. What do you mean, Pastor? I mean that you and I are the earth. God and his S-O-N represent the sun. And in our self-centeredness, we fully expect God to revolve around us and our problems and our issues and our wishes and our dreams. And we want God to serve us. Now, you're not bad people. I love you all. But some of us have a bad case of self-centeredness. And it inhibits our walk with the Lord. In fact, we're off. We're out of balance because we're not properly centered. In fact, God throws us off to recenter our world. God will throw you off so he can get you back on. God is trying to recenter your universe so that the world does not revolve around you. Everything revolves around God. If you can approach God in a way that is not always about what you need, what you want, I guarantee that your relationship with him will be enhanced. What he is trying to do is to usher you through your own personal Copernican revolution. He wants you to see, us to see, that the world doesn't revolve around us. The world revolves around him. And when the world is doing what the world ought to do, when everything is in its right working order, we are revolving around him. Blessing him. How often have we asked God, God, please bless me. God, please bless me. And I don't want to suggest that that's by itself a bad thing, as much as I want to suggest that we need to live our lives in a more balanced way. And this is what Jonah's prayer represents. Let me do this quickly, because I want to prove to you, I want to show you how we ought to imagine our relationship with God. That he doesn't orbit around us and only serve us. In fact, if you have been attentive to the praise and worship period at our church, the music that is offered is specifically designed to make our faith far less about us and far more about God. That's why the psalmist writes in Psalm number 103, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that's within me. You and I have the capacity. In fact, we're designed to bless God, to do something for God before we think about doing so much for ourselves. Listen, we got to make sure that God is the center of our universe. Colossians chapter 1, turn with me quickly. Colossians chapter 1. Let me give you a right and proper perspective that the people of faith ought to have. Colossians chapter 1.